After my sister wrecked my new car, she smirked. Mom and Dad will make you forgive me. They tried. Until I showed them the insurance report. Her smile vanished instantly. I'd always dreamed of owning a brand new car. One that was completely mine, paid for with the sweat of my own hard work. When I finally signed the papers and the dealer dropped the keys into my palm, I felt a rush of pride I hadn't experienced in years, raw, genuine pride in myself. I traced my fingers over the sleek, polished hood, breathed in the rich scent of new leather, and thought, this is mine. Every inch of it belongs to me. But I hadn't even had the car for a full day before my younger sister, Lena, decided my happiness was something she could just take for herself. Lena had been babyed her whole life, never lifted a finger, never faced a real consequence, and never went without something she wanted because our parents always covered for her. She had this entitled way about her, like other people's belongings were just waiting for her to claim them. That evening, when I pulled into my parents' driveway to show off the car, Lena was already there, lounging against the garage with that lazy, smug grin she always wore. She barely glanced up from her phone as I parked. Nice ride, she said, pushing off the wall and sauntering over, peeking through the driver's side window like she'd already decided it was hers. What's the mileage? Less than 100, I replied, keeping my voice calm even as irritation started creeping up. Lena gave a low whistle, impressed. Then, without even asking, she grabbed the handle and swung the door open. Let me take it for a spin. I immediately reached out, shutting the door before she could climb in, shaking my head. Not a chance. I just got it. You're not driving it. She rolled her eyes like I just told her she couldn't borrow a pen. Oh, come on, Mark, don't be such a control freak. It's just a car. Exactly, I shot back. It's just a car that I paid for. With my money. You don't get to take it. But Lena wasn't the type to take no for an answer. She smirked, gave a careless shrug and stepped back, but the look in her eyes told me she wasn't done. I should have trusted that feeling twisting in my gut. Later that night, I made the stupid mistake of leaving my keys on the entryway table for just a few minutes while I ran upstairs to grab something. When I came back down, the keys were gone, and so was my car. My hands clenched into fists as the truth hit me like a punch. Lena. I bolted outside, heart pounding, but the only thing left was the fading echo of screeching tires. I called her again and again, but every call went straight to voicemail. 2 hours later, my phone finally rang. But it wasn't her number. It was an unknown caller. I answered, bracing myself. Mr. Coleman, a deep voice said. This is Officer Reynolds with the County Police Department. I'm calling about a vehicle registered under your name. My stomach dropped. What happened? There's been an accident, he said after a pause. The driver's unhurt, but the vehicle sustained major damage. My grip tightened on the phone. Who was driving? A short silence then. A young woman who identified herself as Lena Coleman. I don't even remember getting into my car, but the next thing I knew, I was pulling up behind flashing police lights, my pulse hammering like a drum. And there she was, Lena, standing next to the wreck that used to be my brand new car, arms crossed, looking completely unbothered. The front bumper was mangled, the hood crumpled in on itself, and one headlight hung shattered. My beautiful car was destroyed, and she stood there like it was no big deal. I slammed my old car door and marched toward her, fists trembling. What the hell did you do? I shouted. Lena finally turned to me, and with that same infuriating smirk said, That sucks. But hey, don't lose your mind. Mom and Dad will make you forgive me. The words hit harder than a slap. Not an apology, not even regret, just pure smug entitlement. She knew our parents would sweep it under the rug like they always did. I took a slow breath, fists tightening, my pulse roaring in my ears. That was it. Something in me snapped. I wasn't letting her walk away from it this time. Not again. Ever had a sibling who thought they could do whatever they wanted and get away with it? 'Cause I was done letting it slide. The next morning I woke up with a pounding headache, my whole body stiff from rage, my mind replaying every moment from the crash site. Lena's smirk burned into my memory like a scar. My car, my pride, my hard-earned achievement, gone in an instant. Wrecked by someone who'd never worked for a thing, never faced a single consequence, and genuinely thought my anger was just an inconvenience in her world. I knew before I even swung my legs out of bed that my parents would be blowing up my phone, that they'd demand a sit down and try to patch this over like they always do, acting like Lena's stunt was just a tiny mistake we could all hush up if I'd only be reasonable and behave like a good son. Sure enough, when I checked my phone there were 3 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Dad, and a text from Lena so dripping with entitlement I had to read it twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Stop being dramatic, Mark. It's just a car. Mom and Dad said we'll figure it out, so quit acting like it's the end of the world. There was no apology, no hint of regret, not even a single sentence admitting she'd done something wrong. Only brazen entitlement in every line. As if the real issue wasn't that she'd taken and wrecked my property, but that I'd dared to get upset about it. I swallowed my anger and forced myself to breathe slow, reminding myself that freaking out over a text wouldn't help a damn thing. Lena had always been like this. I knew exactly where she'd picked it up. I drove to my parents' house in my beat-up backup car, knuckles white on the wheel, gut twisted with equal parts fury and exhaustion, already playing out the conversation in my head. I walked in without bothering to knock, skipped the small talk, and found my parents at the kitchen table looking performatively concerned and thinly annoyed, like somehow I was the one who'd caused the problem. Lena was slouched in a chair, scrolling her phone, looking completely chill like she expected this to blow over, and she'd move on while I cleaned up the mess. Mom sighed like she was already tired of me being there, set her coffee down, rubbed her temples like she'd been victimized by my presence. Mark, honey, we need to talk about this, she said, the way she always does when she wants to sound reasonable but really wants to shut something down. This anger you're holding on to isn't healthy for anyone. I felt something cold and dangerous settle in my chest. A slow-burning anger I'd carried for years but never let myself fully name until that moment. My anger, I echoed, my voice unnervingly calm, my hands gripping the back of an empty chair so hard my fingers ached. You think my anger's the problem here? Mom exchanged a long look with Dad, that quiet signal that told me they'd already decided how this would go before I stepped inside. Sweetheart, she said, dripping condescension like syrup, as if I were a toddler having a meltdown over a broken toy. It's just a car. Lena didn't mean to crash it. It was an accident. We don't think it's fair to punish her so harshly. Something inside me that had been held together with sheer will finally tore. She stole it, I said flatly, keeping my voice steady because if I let myself feel it I knew I'd lose it. I told her no. She took my keys anyway. She stole my car, wrecked it, and then smirked in my face because she knew you'd cover for her, like you always do. Lena let out a theatrical sigh and finally looked up from her phone, rolling her eyes like this whole thing was beneath her. Jesus, sis, you're acting like I murdered someone, she muttered, shaking her head with that smug arrogance that made my skin crawl. Dad reached over and placed his hand on mine, eyes soft and pleading, the kind of look that's dressed up as love, but is really manipulation in a nicer wrapper. Mark, you're her brother, he said gently, tilting his head like he was talking to a kid. I know you're upset, but family forgives, sweetheart. That's what we do, we forgive each other. I stared at him, stunned by the audacity, by how easily he handed the fix to me and expected me to clean it up. Like my feelings were an inconvenience, like my hard work meant nothing as long as Lena was happy. In that moment I realized I'd spent my life being conditioned to accept this treatment, to believe my needs came second, that my anger was unjustified, that my pain was something to swallow for the sake of keeping the family calm. But I wasn't that person anymore, and I wasn't going to let them guilt me into submission this time. So I did something I'd never done before. I smiled. It was small, just a brief flicker of something like amusement, but it made my father pause and made Lena glance at me with a flicker of suspicion. You know what? I said, voice light, face deceptively calm because I'd already decided my next move. You're absolutely right, Dad. Family forgives and I don't want to hold on to this anger. Relief washed over their faces, Lena's smirk snapped back into place, and they all leaned back like they'd won, convinced they'd broken me down to the version of myself they preferred. They had no idea what I was planning. Behind that pleasant agreeability I'd already started setting things in motion. I was going to make Lena pay for what she did, and she didn't know it yet. I'd spent my life hearing that family comes first, that forgiveness is noble and grudges just rot people from the inside. But sitting in my car outside the insurance office, white-knuckled on the steering wheel, I realized those rules had always applied to me and not to her. Lena had never been expected to forgive, compromise, or sacrifice because she'd never actually faced real consequences. Never once, not ever, after years of coasting while other people cleaned up her messes. But that was about to change, and for the first time in my life I wasn't going to be the one left to pick up the pieces. When I stepped into the insurance office, the cool blast of air conditioning hit my skin, a sharp contrast to the slow, hot rage simmering in my chest from the moment Lena had sneered and said our parents would make me forgive her. The man behind the desk barely glanced up as he typed, his tone clipped and professional as he asked how he could help. I breathed slowly to steady myself, knowing that once I put this in motion there was no backing out. I need to file a claim for my car, I said, keeping my voice even and my face neutral. He nodded, clicked a few keys, then looked up. Was it an accident? Do you have a police report? Yes, there's a report, I answered with quiet resolve. And I need to report it as unauthorized use. That made him pause. He blinked and tilted his head like he wanted to make sure he'd heard me right. Unauthorized use? He repeated, curiosity in his voice. I could have lied and said she had permission, but the truth was harsher and more useful. I never gave her permission, I said carefully. I told her she couldn't drive my car, and she took it anyway. He hesitated for a second, then typed while scanning his screen. If you can show proof you denied permission and she took the vehicle regardless, then yes, this qualifies as unauthorized use. I pulled my phone out and brought up the texts where I'd told Lena no and where she'd laughed it off. I turned the screen so he could read them. His eyebrows rose and he nodded. This should be sufficient, he said, professional now, moving through the steps with practiced precision. Since you're filing for unauthorized use, liability won't fall on you. It will transfer to the driver. Lena. The reality settled over me like warm honey over cold steel, smoothing my fury into something darkly satisfying. Lena, who'd spent her whole life dodging responsibility, was finally going to have to answer for something. Lena, who'd smirked and told me I'd have to forgive her, was about to feel what happens when the world doesn't bend to her will. How much are we talking? I asked, my voice steady even as a strange thrill ran through me. He checked his screen, adjusted his glasses, and answered, given the damage, she'll be on the hook for somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000. $30,000 to $40,000. I let the number roll over me, tasting it like vindication. Lena had never faced anything worse than a slap on the wrist, but that weight was about to come crashing down on her, and I wasn't going to lift a finger to stop it. When I stepped back out into the sunlight, the day felt brighter and crisper, and for the first time since this nightmare began I felt good, powerful, almost free. That night I scrolled social media and stopped cold at Lena's latest post. A photo of her and friends at a bar, drinks in hand, caption dripping with the same entitlement, tough day but nothing a few drinks can't fix. Some people need to chill and move on. Life's too short to stress about little things. Little things, she actually called it that. The audacity made me laugh. A sound so unexpected it surprised me, and I leaned back on the couch shaking my head. Lena thought she'd won. Thought our parents had bailed her out and everything would go back to normal. Thought I'd swallow my anger like I always had. But what she didn't know, what she wouldn't know until the claim finished processing, was that I wasn't letting this go. This time Lena was going to learn the hard way, and by the time she realized what I'd done it would be too late. Sitting at the dinner table later, I could feel their expectations pressing down on me like a weight, as if they'd decided tonight would be the moment I folded back into line. My father had set the table like it was a holiday. Candles flickering, roasted chicken and buttery mashed potatoes filling the room. Everything staged to make this a family reconciliation and smooth over what they viewed as an unnecessary conflict. My mother sat at the head of the table, composed and unreadable, and I knew exactly why we were there, why dinner had been planned so soon after the accident, why Lena sat across with that insufferable smirk and her phone by her plate as if she couldn't be bothered to pretend this mattered. I could feel it coming, the carefully rehearsed conversation they'd all practiced in their heads, the exact phrases they'd used to paint my anger as an inconvenience instead of a rightful reaction, to make it seem like Lena deserved my forgiveness simply because she was family. But as I sat there with my hands folded in my lap and a thick envelope tucked beneath the table between my fingers, I felt an odd, eerie calm, because unlike them I already knew exactly how this dinner would end. Lena spoke first, her voice slick with the same cultivated arrogance she'd worn since we were kids. every sentence soaked in condescension as she leaned back, arms folded and that awful smirk spreading over her face. "So you calmed down yet? Or are you still planning to throw a tantrum over a stupid car?" Her words barely registered because I'd already expected this performance. Already braced for how she'd turn it into a punchline and make me look unreasonable in front of Mom and Dad. I just tipped my head and offered a small, unreadable smile, letting her confidence grow while my parents traded relieved looks, convinced they'd won. My father sighed with that practiced blend of exasperation and faux patience, theatrical, like he was the only adult willing to mediate this crisis, and said in that soothing tone he uses when he wants to shut me down, "Mark, sweetheart, we need to move past this as a family. Lena made a mistake, but holding on to anger won't fix anything." Mom, the ever-practical one who prides herself on being level-headed, nodded without looking up from her plate and cut into her chicken. "Life's too short to get hung up on stuff like this, Mark. At the end of the day, it's just a car. Things can be replaced. Family can't." I could practically feel Lena radiating satisfaction, watching her bask in the idea of my defeat as her ego swelled with each second, her smirk growing more unbearable. She twirled her fork like she was bored and said, "Seriously, sis, you need to chill. You've always been like this, overreacting, making everything huge. I mean, come on, you cracked a car, not someone's life. You'll get over it." As she chuckled, Dad reached across the table and laid a comforting hand over mine while Mom nodded at Lena like she just delivered the final, sensible word, and that was the moment I moved. I slid my hand beneath the table, brought the envelope into view, and set it down in front of Lena with a deliberate thunk that made the silverware rattle and forced all three of them to look. Lena barely glanced at it at first, still smug, shaking her head as if my next move couldn't possibly be worth her time. "What's this? Some angry letter about my feelings?" she said. "Read it," I replied simply, my voice even, my face blank. Something in my tone made her pause. Her amusement flickered and the smirk wavered as she reached for the envelope, fingers hesitating for the tiniest fraction before she ripped it open. The instant she drew out the pages and her eyes skimmed the headline printed at the top, the color drained from her face so fast it felt almost poetic. I watched silently as her hands tightened around the paper, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly, her posture collapsing from smug certainty into stunned horror. Dad frowned, looking between us with confusion, his fingers clenching near mine as the tension in the room spiked. "Mark, what is this?" he asked. Lena's voice fell to a hoarse whisper as she gripped the document so hard the edges crumpled. "What did you do?" I sipped my wine, letting the silence stretch long enough to make them uncomfortable, long enough for the weight of the truth to settle on Lena's shoulders, then spoke in a calm, measured tone that felt almost gentle. "That," I said, "is the finalized insurance report, the document that officially transfers full liability to you." The air changed in an instant. It thickened and pressed down on them, the realization slamming into Mom and Dad like a physical blow. Mom looked up, fork frozen halfway to her mouth, eyes calculating as she tried to piece together how Lena had gone from untouchable to accountable. Dad snatched at the papers, flipping through them with rising panic as he read the bold numbers laid out on the page. For the first time in her life, Lena looked afraid, and I felt a satisfaction so deep I'd never experienced anything like it. Her chair scraped back hard enough to clatter the silverware as she pushed away from the table, breath coming in ragged bursts, her face a mix of disbelief and fury, hands crushing the insurance sheets until the corners buckled. She stood there, chest heaving, staring at me like I'd betrayed her, as if the crime was my refusal to play along and forgive her, not her theft and wrecking of my property. When she finally spoke, the words were tight and raw, her voice shaking with rage that barely stayed contained. "This isn't funny, Mark. Tell me you're joking." I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch, watching panic flicker across Lena's face as she glanced between me and our parents like she expected them to swoop in and erase this before it could blow up. My father's mouth hung open a little, his fingers worrying at his shirt, eyes skimming the papers as if hunting for some loophole, some escape clause that would make all this vanish. My mother, ever composed, took a steady breath, set her palms flat on the table, and spoke in that measured, controlled voice that always hid how frustrated she really was. "Mark," she said, gaze sharp and loaded with expectation, the tone she uses when she wants me to fold. "This is going too far. You're punishing your sister in a way that's not just harsh, it's vindictive. Lena let out a bitter, forced laugh, running her fingers through her hair, pacing a little like a trapped animal, shaking her head as if the idea of this being serious was absurd. This is insane. You're trying to ruin my life over a damn car. I leaned back, crossed my arms, kept my face unreadable and my voice steady. No, Lena, I'm not ruining your life. I'm just not cleaning up your mess this time. My father inhaled sharply, his hand flying to his chest like I'd struck him, eyes wide with disbelief at the idea that I wouldn't play the part they'd always assigned me, the responsible one, the forgiver, the one who sacrificed so Lena never had to. Sweetheart, this is going to follow her for years, he whispered, voice trembling as he gripped the papers, trying to will them away. Insurance claims like this, the financial burden, this isn't a small thing. This could ruin her credit, her future, her ability to... To what, Dad? I cut in, my voice sharper now, patience thinning. Hands braced on the table edge to steady myself against the weight of being the family safety net, while Lena kept taking. Lena slammed her palms on the back of her chair, jaw tight, her whole body wound so tight I thought she might break. You're acting like I killed someone, she snarled, eyes blazing, voice shaking. I made a mistake, okay? I took your car, I wrecked it. I was scared about it. Fine, I screwed up. But you... She jabbed at the papers in Dad's hands, face twisted. You went out of your way to make this as bad as possible for me. Something raw flared inside me at that. Something furious and long simmering. I stood up slowly, deliberately, fixed my gaze on her, and spoke low and steady, my anger cold and precise. You didn't care when I lost something I worked for. Why should I care now that you're losing something? The words knocked the wind out of her. For a beat her face shifted, a flash of regret passing like lightning, then it was gone, covered over by entitlement and indignation. Mom exhaled through her nose and rubbed her temples like my refusal to cave was an annoying chore she'd have to deal with. Mark, I get that you're upset, but this isn't right. We're family, we don't do this to each other. I let out a hollow laugh, arms folded tighter. We don't do this to each other? Funny, Mom, because Lena had no problem doing it to me and you had no problem letting her. Lena scoffed, clutching her hair like she might tear it out, voice cracking when reality crept in. I don't have that kind of money, she muttered. How am I supposed to pay for this? For the first time that night I smiled, but it was cold, not soft, not forgiving. Figure it out, I said simply, and turned toward the door without looking back, refusing to give her even a sliver of satisfaction. I heard my father call after me, desperation in his voice, begging me to think it through, to be reasonable, not to let this tear the family apart, but I didn't stop. Lena had taken from me, and for the first time in her life she was going to have to give something back whether she liked it or not. Days went by and Lena didn't call, didn't text, didn't try to reach out, no surprise. I knew she was scrambling, panicking, trying to find a way out, praying someone would bail her out like they always had. I pictured her pacing in that overpriced apartment, hands in her hair, ringing Mom and Dad every hour to demand they fix this, never once considering maybe this was too big to sweep under the rug. I knew my parents had money, but not that kind of magic. 40 grand wasn't something they could make vanish without sacrifices that would shake the foundations of their comfortable life and make them deeply, plainly uncomfortable. If there was one thing I was sure of, it was that my parents hated being uncomfortable. 3 days later there was a hard knock on my door, so frantic I didn't even need the peephole to know who it was. The impatient rhythm, the sharp exhale on the other side, the entitlement practically vibrating through the wood told me everything. I took my time opening it, letting her stew in the silence, letting that tiny slice of helplessness I'd felt when she'd stolen and wrecked my car settle on her for once. When I finally cracked the door, she stood there, a mess, dark circles under her eyes, posture hunched, fingers twitching like she was barely holding herself together. I leaned against the frame, arms crossed, eyebrow raised. Something wrong, Lena? Her jaw tightened, eyes flashing with something raw and dangerous, like a last grab for control. You need to undo this, she said low and tight. I don't care what it takes. I don't care what you want from me. Just make this go away. I breathed out a quiet, steadying breath and shook my head. It's done, I said, voice calm and unshakable. You'd need a lawyer and about 30 grand to fight it, and we both know you don't have either. For a beat something in her face splintered, a tiny fracture in that practiced mask, a raw panic that she tried to smother, and then the old anger came rushing back. She let out a bitter laugh, raked her hands through her hair, shoulders bunching, breathing uneven. You seriously hate me that much? She demanded, voice rising. You actually think I deserve to have my whole life ruined over a parked car? I tipped my head and watched her like I was seeing a spectacle. You wrecked my car without a second thought, Lena. Why should I care that I'm wrecking your bank account? Her hands clenched into fists, nostrils flaring, her body trembling with barely controlled rage. Her voice cracked with desperation. This isn't fair, Mark. You're punishing me for something that wasn't supposed to be this serious. I made a mistake, okay? A stupid mistake. But what you're doing, it's cruel, it's calculated, it's insane. My lips twitched, not quite a smile, just a small, satisfied acknowledgement of the irony. She was finally getting a taste of accountability. You'll figure it out, I said, shifting my weight, my tone light and dismissive. That's what you always do, right? For the first time in her life, she had no ready answer. I started to close the door, but her phone buzzed in her pocket and I watched the color drain from her face as she fumbled it out, eyes scanning the screen with something like dread. I propped myself in the frame and asked innocently, "What's wrong?" Her mouth opened but no words came, just a sharp breath and the sound of her world tilting. In that exact second I knew. It was the note from her employer, the one saying her reckless behavior had triggered concerns. The promotion was under review, her Golden Girl immunity finally fraying. She went quiet in a way I'd never seen before. I didn't wait for her to look up and read the whole truth on her own face. I didn't wait for the excuses or the pleading. I smiled, slow, knowing, satisfied, and shut the door gently but firmly, leaving Lena, for the first time, truly alone.